All right, sixth graders, I'm back, and this time with realistic fiction. And actually, one of the books on this part of the list is nonfiction, which we will talk about. It's another one that I just read this summer. The first one that I'm going to start with is up here. Now, let me grab my pointer and go up here so you can see that I'm talking about Click Here to Start by Dennis Markell. And this is the story about young Ted who goes to see his Uncle Ted, who's actually dying in the hospital. And Uncle Ted tells him that, he asks him if he's still playing those games online and if he feels like he's pretty good at it. And they seem like very strange questions coming from someone who, is older and he really hasn't had much contact with. And so he's not quite sure why Uncle Ted is asking him. He sets him off on a treasure hunt, and but he doesn't know what the treasure is. So Ted and his friends start to try to find the clues. And one of the things is they go to Uncle Ted's apartment, thinking that that's where they should start. And Uncle Ted's apartment, after he's passed away, but the apartment is a total disaster. It's cluttered. It's hard to figure out even where to start, like which books might clues be hidden in, or other things that are just sort of strewn about the place. And so the clues, the the story starts to get a little more interesting when they realize that someone else, whatever this treasure is that they seek, someone else wants it too, and they want it badly. And the reason that they start to realize that someone else is after it is one day when they all go back to the apartment together, they realize that there are some things that are out of place, like a book that's just sort of been tipped on a bookshelf, and some magazines that had been in a box have been strewn out all over the place. So somebody else wants the clue and wants to be able to find the treasure before them. And as the game progresses, and Ted's pretty good at solving these games, at following these clues, it also starts to get more dangerous. And clearly, what is at the end is not necessarily a treasure, but something that could reveal a past mistake or injustice that somebody doesn't want uncovered. So, Click Here to Start is our first book on the realistic shelf. Another one that is really sort of an exciting adventure is just right here. It's called Beneath, and it's by Roland Smith, and it's the story of Pat and his brother Coop. And Coop has always been interested in the underground. Now, when you live in New York City, it's sort of like this sub city underneath the city streets. There are old abandoned subway lines and maybe even buildings that have just been built up over, or the foundations of old buildings. So Coop likes to disappear underneath and investigate all of these really sort of strange oddities from the past. And it's just something that he does, and he can disappear for days. Well, Pat gets concerned when Coop doesn't say goodbye and he just leaves. And then and when he doesn't hear from him until he starts getting messages, a package that's with a handheld voice recorder, and starts telling Pat that he needs help with these, he's got these memory sticks. So it's really sort of old tech that they're using to communicate. And so Pat decides that he's going to venture underground. Well, together, when they finally find each other, they realize that there's a whole world underground. And now the weathermen in the 1960s and 70s were a very radical group who were trying to bring about change by bringing down the government. And it turns out that some of the members of that group have literally gone underground, created a whole new world, and are trying to find their way back to the surface where they can bring about the change that they wanted to make almost 45 or 50 years ago. This, of course, puts Pat and Coop and the granddaughter of the Lord of the Deep in grave danger as they try to escape and let people know what's going on. Beneath. And then there's a sequel to it that you will want to read. Over here we have Crossover. This is a book in verse. This is by Kwame Alexander. It's the Bell twins. They've been best friends forever. They have always played basketball. Their father, Chuck Bell, played basketball almost in a professional way, semi-professional. But then, even though they're twins and they have similar interests, they start to grow apart. One starts to find that he wants a girlfriend, and the other one's a little upset that, they're not on the same page anymore. And so as this tension starts to mount between the two boys, suddenly something happens with their father that makes them realize where they need to place their value of what's important, and why basketball continues to be such an important part of their lives. This is a quick read. It's a great read. You'll really enjoy the brothers. And Rebound is the prequel to this, which is the story of Chuck Bell and how he got to be such a great basketball player, and why he wants basketball to be important in his son's lives as well. Rain, Rain. Homonyms. There are so many of them, homophones, and they can have different meanings. And this is a story of Rose. And Rose has Asperger's. And so she likes patterns in her life. She likes control of certain situations. She doesn't always interact socially very comfortably with a lot of different people, but she does have a dog. And the dog is sort of her lifeline to being able to be comfortable with other people. And then one day, in the midst of a rainstorm, her dog runs away. And she is going to have to pull on every skill she has to be able to communicate with people that what she needs to do is get help to find this dog who's so important in her life. So Rain, Rain, and that's by Anne M. Martin. Next, we have Hoot, which for you budding environmentalists, burrowing owls are endangered in Florida. And we have Mullet Fingers, who's a boy who's trying to save them. The locals want to build a pancake house. There's this investor who wants to build a pancake house, and he wants to build it on land that is the nesting ground for burrowing owls. And it's called Mother Paula's All American Pancake Houses. And so Roy, who's just moved to this area of Florida, befriends Mullet Fingers, who seems to almost be homeless and almost, living on his own in the wild, but is determined that he is going to save these animals. And Roy becomes embroiled in this local conflict about who should win this, the environmentalists or the capitalists who want to build the new pancake house. Carl Hyacin, there are some laugh out loud funny moments and some very serious moments, and you would definitely enjoy this book. All right, All Rise for Honorable Perry T. Cook. Perry, over here, was born in jail. His mother committed a crime. She went to jail. It's really like a woman's prison, but it's not. It's for not for dangerous offenders. So actually, the warden decides to make arrangements so that Perry can be raised there, and his extended family becomes other people who are there. And he really starts to count on all of these people along with his mother as his family. Well, one day they decide that he can no longer be educated there and that he needs to be sent to public school. And he makes friends with a girl at public school. I mean, it's really hard to explain where he's been all this time and what his life is like, but he makes friends. He goes to her house for dinner and meets her parents, and it turns out that her father is the district attorney. And now her father is determined that Perry will no longer be able to live at the prison, that in fact he will come live with them. And Perry is equally determined to prove that his life has been good there, that he has people who care about him, and that his mother needs to be forgiven for whatever it was that she has done so that they can live a life together. All Rise, The Honorable Perry T. Cook by Leslie Connor. The Other Boy, which is right over here, is a story of Shane Woods. He and his mother have moved from Northern California to this new town where Shane is a star pitcher on the baseball team. And he makes friends. He has very good friends. His father still lives up in Northern California, and his father seems to be wanting to stir up a little bit of trouble. Shane and his mother go up for a doctor's appointment. And while all of this is happening, a cousin from someone that he knew in his old school, moves into the new school district where Shane is now a pitcher and where he lives. And he knows Shane's secret. And Shane is very worried that if people learn who he really is, that they will not only not befriend him anymore, but he will not be able to play baseball, which is the thing that he lives for. And Shane's secret is Shane was born a girl. The next one is Ghost by Jason Reynolds. And this is all part of that track series that he's written. And this is the first one in the track series. And this is Castle Cranshaw. He's been running for 3 years. And that's ever since he got into a fight with his father while he was trying to protect his mother. His father's in prison, and his mother works at the hospital cafeteria to pay the bills. And Castle kind of gets himself into a lot of trouble. He makes bad decisions. But one day, the track coach, who actually is well known for creating these winning teams, sees him running and wants him to join the team. And of course, at first, Castle is very certain that he's faster than anybody on the team. And then he learns that, maybe there are some stylistic things that he needs to know. But the coach warns him that he cannot go down the path that he's been going down if he wants to stay on the team. He has to straighten things out for himself. He can't be angry anymore, and he can't be making the questionable choices that he's made in the past. And so is Ghost going to be able to make the choices to change his life for him so he can stay on this track team? Does running mean that much to him? And will he be able to do it? Greetings from Witness Protection is up here, and we have this young girl, Nikki, whose father is in jail. And she's all alone, and she's a ward of the state. And so the FBI, these two U.S. Marshals, come in and they take her, and what they want to do is change everything about her, like help her learn how to be a member of a family that is going into the witness protection program. So she has to pretend to be their daughter. She has to learn everything about them. She has to go by a different name. And actually, she's very smart and she's very brave. And part of the reason that they pick her is that they feel like maybe she could protect the family if something should happen. Well, needless to say, it's pretty bumpy when you try to join somebody else's family, especially for their son, who is not at all keen on the idea of having this person pretend and having to go into witness protection and leave all of their friends behind. Sadly, some of the people that they are trying to be protected from start to figure out who they are and where they are. And some of that comes through Nikki. And is she going to be able to save them from these people who want to see them dead? Greetings from Witness Protection. Restart, up here by Gordon Korman, is an interesting book. Chase Ambrose feels like he's lucky to be alive. He's a football player in middle school. He fell off a roof and he was unconscious. And when he comes to, he has amnesia. He can't remember anything. He can't remember the type of person that he was. He can't remember who his former friends were. He doesn't remember pretty much anything about the way he behaved before his accident. Well, it turns out that Chase Ambrose was quite a bully at school. And he was particularly so hard on one girl's brother that the brother has left the school and gone off to a boarding school, and he's miserable there. He wants to come back. So she doesn't trust Chase, but her friends do. And he starts to be part of the film club and, join in with people that he was never friends with before. And his former friends really don't understand what's going on because they want him to be back with, their crew that sort of ruled the school and ruled the halls. And, we're not friends with the film club, but we're the ones who tortured them. Well, as the story starts to be uncovered, we find out that the reason that Chase was on the roof went back to his earlier bullying behavior, but he needs to count on his friends to believe that even with head injury and amnesia, he really means to change, and he really can. So that's Restart. Do you believe that a bully can actually really change? Next, we have Rising Water, and that's right here. And can you imagine if you went off with your soccer team for a competition and you decide that you're going to go to a state park and suddenly something geographic and catastrophic happens where you might not be able to get out? Well, that's what happens to this group of boys, this soccer team in Thailand. They go and they're just exploring in these tunnels, and suddenly the tide comes in, and there's no way for them to get out. And this is the harrowing story of what it took, the technology they had to use, and how many divers tried to get into that cave to rescue these boys. And also, to really look at the very real possibility that they might not make it out alive. So this is the nonfiction book on the list, and Rising Waters, and it is quite an adventure. Clean Getaway by Nick Stone, which is right over here. We have Scoob. His nickname when he was little was Scooby Doo, and he gets himself into trouble at school. He lives with his dad, who's pretty strict. His dad is, very successful engineer, but he's pretty strict. And so when Scoob gets in trouble and is suspended for a couple of days, he's grounded, he has his phone taken away, he has all sorts of privileges taken away. Well, his grandma, who he calls Gma, shows up in a recreational vehicle and says she wants to go on a road trip, and does Scoob want to go with her? And he says, of course, because he doesn't want to stay um, under the strict rules of his father. Well, it turns out that his grandmother is going on this trip to relive some things from her own past and to try and set things right in her own memory. Scoob's grandfather got into some trouble. The father never forgave him, and Scoob's grandmother feels really sad about this. And so, as they travel to the various sites that they went to almost 50 years before, Scoob also starts to learn a little bit about the civil rights movement and what life was like, because even though his grandmother is white, his grandfather was black, and he's biracial. And to understand what life was like at a time where they had to use a thing called a green book to know where they could stay safely and eat safely, and which towns they had to be out of by sundown, and how this affected their first trip. Along the way, he starts to notice some really strange behavior of his Gma. He also, having left his own phone at home, starts to be worried that she's not answering his father's phone calls, and then one day just throws her phone away. And as her behavior becomes a little bit more peculiar, Scoob starts to worry that maybe everything isn't right with her, and wonders what he's going to be able to do to help her. So, Clean Getaway by Dick Stone. This is one of my favorites. It's The Truth is Told by Mason Buttle. And how would you like it if someone that you was like your best friend suddenly died in an accident? And as hard as that might be, that also being the one that people blame for it. And well, that's what's happened to Mason. There's a tragic accident, and his friend Benny is hurt in the accident and dies. And people blame Mason, and Mason struggles with communicating his word through his words with what to say. He doesn't know how to tell his part of the story, and he doesn't know everything that happened and why that happened that day, but people blame him. And so not only does he lose Benny, but he also has no friends, and he still finds himself being victimized by the same bullies that used to victimize both Mason and Benny. Then he makes a new friend. His new friend is Calvin. And Calvin, finds himself being bullied by the same kids that live up the hill in the same neighborhood. But because of that sort of shared experience and just some common interests, Calvin and Mason start to develop a friendship. And it seems like just maybe Mason is going to come out on the other side of this with a new friend. He's learned how to use Dragon Speak at school so he can get his thoughts out onto paper. And then suddenly, one day, Calvin goes missing, and people start to point the finger at Mason once again. The Truth as Told by Mason Buttle. I think that's all of the books on the realistic fiction list. So I'm going to end this part of the book talk right now, and I will see you on the other side with science fiction and fantasy. Thanks for listening.